Mary was called again by a guest in room 1017. They kept complaining that the guest in the next room was too loud. She could hear people arguing loudly inside. This was the fourth time she had knocked on the door tonight, but this time she suddenly heard a loud. Mary was terrified. She yelled the guest's name, Mr. Olson, and knocked on the door harder, but it still wouldn't open. Soon after, the manager and maintenance staff arrived with a master key and opened the door. The window of the hotel room was shattered open. Down on the street, people were shouting, someone had jumped. Police quickly identified the victim as Frank Olson, and the man who shared the room with him as Robert Lashbrook. Both were CIA officers. Police closed the case, saying Frank had fallen out the window intentionally, but people who knew him didn't believe that. They traced everything back to a secret meeting held near Deep Creek Lake, Maryland. A strange gathering, meant to test whether the CIA's new mind control substance actually worked. Whatever happened in that meeting was the beginning of something the CIA could never bury. Robert Lashbrook, a CIA chemist, was in the same hotel room on the 13th floor of the Statler Hotel in Manhattan as Olson. Specifically, according to the official police report and Lashbrook's own statements, he was sitting on the toilet in the bathroom when Olson allegedly fell or jumped from the window around 2:30 a.m. The room was small, with the window partially blocked by a radiator and curtains drawn. Hotel night manager Armin Pastor later testified it was implausible for Olson to have run across the dark room in underwear, avoiding two beds, and dove through a closed window without interference. This fueled conspiracy theories that Lashbrook may have been involved in a cover-up, or even the death itself. Olson and Lashbrook had been sharing the room after Olson's LSD-induced breakdown during a CIA retreat at Deep Creek Lake, Maryland earlier that week. They had flown to NYC for treatment under CIA-linked Dr. Harold Abramson. On the night of November 27th to 28th, Olson had attended a Broadway show and seemed agitated. According to Lashbrook's account, around 2 a.m., he got up to go to the bathroom. Due to the small size of the hotel room, he could barely hear anything outside once the bathroom door was closed. I was in there for less than 10 minutes when I suddenly heard a loud crash, like the sound of glass shattering, he said. He claimed he pushed the door open immediately, and the sight before him made his blood run cold. The curtains were fluttering wildly in the wind. The once closed window was broken wide open, and the dark night sky stretched outside. Olson's jacket was still draped over the edge of the bed, but he was nowhere to be seen. When questioned by the police, he repeated this version of events over and over, denying all accusations of cover-up. He even pointed out that a radiator was positioned to the left of the window, adding that Olson had only been wearing light underclothes. Details, he said, supported the idea that Olson's fall had been an unplanned accident, not a deliberate act. Robert Lashbrook's bond with Frank Olson began during their time working together at the Fort Detrick Biological Weapons Laboratory. Both were core research scientists there, deeply immersed in the field of biochemical weapons for years. They were not only tacit partners at work, but also familiar friends in private. But few knew Lashbrook had another identity. He was a key operative in the CIA's secret programs, and it all traced back to what seemed like an ordinary research gathering at Deep Creek Lake. After that meeting, Olson's demeanor changed drastically. Once a calm, meticulous scientist, he became extremely irritable, often fidgeting restlessly in his office with a look of fear in his eyes. He even grabbed colleagues and muttered repeatedly, "What we're doing is wrong, it crosses a line." Olson's unusual behavior was soon noticed by their supervisor, Sidney Gottlieb. Gottlieb knew full well that Olson held countless core secrets about the program, details of the MK-Ultra project and biochemical weapons research data. If Olson had a mental breakdown and revealed the truth, the consequences would be catastrophic. So a comfort mission was quickly arranged. Gottlieb personally ordered Lashbrook to accompany Olson to New York for the entire trip. Sidney Gottlieb and Frank Olson's relationship was defined by the core dynamic of decision-maker and executor within the MKUltra program. As director of the CIA's technical services staff, Gottlieb was the sole mastermind behind MKUltra. Olson, serving as chief biochemist in Fort Detrick's Special Operations Division, was handpicked by Gottlieb to lead research on combining biological weapons with mind-controlled drugs, a partnership that spanned the critical phases of the MKUltra initiative. He submitted encrypted weekly reports directly to Gottlieb, and even held clearance to brief him in his White House office, solidifying his role as Gottlieb's most trusted technical linchpin in biochem warfare. As the mastermind behind the CIA's MKUltra mind control program, Sidney Gottlieb's fingerprints were all over Frank Olson's tragic story. From the secret experiment that unraveled Olson, to the cover-up that followed his death. On the morning of Frank's death, Sidney Gottlieb was notified by Robert Lashbrook. Gottlieb promptly submitted a report to CIA Director Alan Dulles, stating that Olson had died in an accidental fall after experiencing mental instability linked to a November 19th security test. A reference to the Deep Creek Lake LSD administration. The report also noted that local authorities had ruled the death a suicide due to mental stress, and that relevant materials had been sealed. 9 days before Olson's death, on November 19, 1953, Gottlieb hosted a retreat for 9 MKUltra researchers, including Olson, at a cabin near Maryland's Deep Creek Lake. There, without anyone's knowledge, he slipped LSD into their drinks, a test to see how key personnel would hold up under chemical influence. Olson returned to work at Fort Detrick 2 days later. But co-workers immediately noticed a change. The once diligent biochemist grew distracted, made uncharacteristic mistakes, and began voicing sharp ethical concerns about the program's non-consensual experiments. Those worries reached Gottlieb, who met privately with Olson on November 24th. No verbatim record exists, but investigators later confirmed Gottlieb saw Olson's doubts as a security risk and within 48 hours, arranged for him to go to New York for medical evaluation with CIA handler Robert Lashbrook in tow. By that point, MKUltra had ballooned into a massive operation, spanning 80 academic institutions and hospitals, funding secret studies on LSD and behavioral modification, all without ethical oversight. And the timeline told the whole story. Olson's unknowing LSD exposure, his moral crisis, Gottlieb's hasty intervention, and the fatal New York trip. Every piece tied MKUltra to Olson's end, with Gottlieb at the center of the secrecy that kept the truth buried for decades. In 1953, when news of Frank Olson's death reached his family, his son Eric Olson was just 9 years old. At his funeral, his casket was sealed tight. His family never got to say a proper goodbye. That lie sat in Eric's heart like a seed, untouched for 22 years. Then, on June 11, 1975, a Washington Post article shattered the family. It described an Army civilian employee who jumped to his death from a New York hotel window after being slipped LSD at a CIA meeting. Story didn't name Frank Olson, but his family knew instantly it was him. This was right after Watergate, when the CIA was already mired in scandal, and the article blew up. Eric and his family had had enough of the lies. His mother Alice released a public statement declaring, "We have never believed Frank died in some unexplained suicide since 1953. She announced they'd sue the CIA for millions in damages." That lawsuit reached all the way to the White House. Fearing more secrets would leak, President Ford personally invited the Olsons to the White House to issue a formal apology on behalf of the U.S. government. CIA Director William Colby even admitted there had been severe oversight failures in the MKUltra program. But Eric was far from satisfied with this belated apology. He immediately sensed inconsistencies in the official narrative. While the CIA admitted to slipping LSD to Frank at the Deep Creek Lake retreat, a fact confirmed by the 1975 Church Committee hearings and declassified MKUltra documents, which also served as the source of the article the family read about an employee who jumped from a Manhattan hotel. They refused to elaborate on the circumstances of his death. Eric spent years digging for more. Gottlieb's public testimony and internal records corroborated key details. He acknowledged authorizing the LSD administration at Deep Creek Lake as part of a security resilience test for key researchers. When pressed about Frank's subsequent death during congressional hearings and internal inquiries, Gottlieb consistently invoked CIA protocol, declining to discuss specifics by citing operational confidentiality, never confirming or denying direct involvement in the fatal incident. Determined to find hard proof, Eric made a shocking decision on June 2, 1994. He had his father's body exhumed for a new forensic examination. The results stunned everyone. There were no glass shards on Frank's head or neck, directly contradicting the jumping through a broken window story. Even more damning, his skull above the left eye and his breastbone showed clear signs of blunt force trauma, proof of a beating before death. The forensic pathologist concluded, these injuries did not occur during the fall, they most likely happened before it. Frank Olson was deliberately thrown out the window. The accidental fall lie was completely debunked. At a press conference, Eric declared through tears, "My father was murdered. Someone feared he'd expose the CIA's secrets, and they silenced him." Frank Olson was born on July 17, 1910, in Hurley, Iron County, Wisconsin, to Swedish immigrant parents, Carl and Esther Olson, who ran a small family farm. He grew up in a rural, working-class household during the Great Depression, excelling in science and earning a scholarship to the University of Wisconsin-Madison, where he received his Bachelor of Science in Bacteriology in 1934 and PhD in 1938. After graduation, he taught briefly at Purdue University before joining the U.S. Army Chemical Corps in 1943 during World War II. Driven by a deep sense of patriotism to serve his country in the fight against fascism, he worked at Camp Detrick, now Fort Detrick, in Frederick, Maryland, on biological weapons research. Viewing his role in developing defensive measures against potential Axis bioweapons as a patriotic duty, colleagues later recalled that Olson volunteered for hazardous field tests, including aerosol exposure trials in the Utah desert, an act of brave dedication that stemmed from his belief and his sense of duty to protect his country. In 1942, he married Alice Thompson, a fellow University of Wisconsin graduate, and they had 3 children, Eric, Nils, and Lisa. He turned down higher-paying civilian offers to remain at Detrick, telling his wife Alice, "This is where I'm needed most." Even after the war, he stayed on as a civilian scientist, justifying his MK-Ultra collaboration, including LSD aerosol delivery systems, as protecting American soldiers from Soviet mind control, a stance he defended in internal memos as patriotic science in a dangerous world. Described by colleagues as a quiet, patriotic family man with a dry sense of humor, he lived a modest suburban life in Frederick until his death. Yet Frank Olson's death was never officially ruled a homicide. While the 1994 autopsy found pre-fall blunt force trauma, some pathologists on the team argued the injuries could have happened during the fall. No murder weapon, no timeline for the attack, and no proof tying anyone like Lashbrook to the crime. There were no witnesses, no DNA, nothing concrete. Additionally, the CIA had destroyed most MK-Ultra files in 1973, wiping out key details about the Deep Creek Lake retreat. By the time investigators dug in, key witnesses were either elderly or dead, making it impossible to re-interview them. The CIA also stonewalled investigations by invoking national security. The 1975 Church Committee exposed MK-Ultra, but didn't press criminal charges, they just recommended reforms. In 2001, Manhattan District Attorney Robert Morgenthau closed the homicide investigation, citing insufficient evidence and the passage of time. But questions still linger about Frank's death. Why did the CIA immediately push for a suicide ruling within hours of Olson's fall, without conducting a thorough forensic investigation? What was the true purpose of Robert Lashbrook's constant accompaniment to New York? Why did the CIA destroy most MK-Ultra files in 1973, just 2 years before the Church Committee's investigation, specifically wiping records of the Deep Creek Lake retreat and Olson's case? And perhaps the truth isn't that simple either. After all, what prompted Olson's sudden ethical awakening after the LSD dosing? Did he uncover more unethical MK-Ultra operations that made him a liability? The most common theory about Frank Olson's death is that he was silenced after threatening to expose MK-Ultra's darkest secrets. From dosing people with LSD without consent to testing biological weapons on civilians. After the LSD incident made him question the program's morality, Some believe Sidney Gottlieb ordered Lashbrook or another CIA agent to kill him. The 1994 autopsy backs this up, showing blunt force trauma before the fall, and no glass on his body, suggesting he was knocked out and thrown from the window. Another theory, pushed by Olson's son Eric, claims Lashbrook and another agent were interrogating him about leaking secrets when things turned violent. They allegedly threw him out the window to cover it up, which matches hotel staff accounts that the small room would have made it impossible not to hear a struggle, contradicting Lashbrook's bathroom story. A third theory suggests the LSD left Olson paranoid and unstable, and the CIA exploited that. Lashbrook may have manipulated him, hinting at consequences if he spoke out, pushing him further into distress before his fall. Critics argue this doesn't explain the blunt force injuries, but it fits with the CIA's known use of psychological manipulation under MKUltra.